Today we're beginning a conversation around this book, which is called The Inner Work of Age, or Shifting from Roles to Souls. But before I do that, I should say next week we have a congregational meeting, which we will meet at right after church. We do not leave your seat. It will only take about 5 minutes. If you do, stay within your proximity of your seat, and we'll just get it out of the way. We're going to announce the new board members. Now, back to this book. This book, I thought about it a lot in the last week. I don't want people who are under the age of 65 to think this book is not about them. Because largely the practices that this book is talking about are the same practices I started in my 30s and have not finished yet. So, and there are basically three practices that this book is inviting us to do. The three practices really address different parts of our being. And the first practice is the practice of recognizing your shadow. According to Robert Bly, who was a poet who died recently, was very big in the men's movement. Robert Bly used to say that when you are born, they give you a bag, and in that bag you stuff everything that the people who are training you to be a human being think is unacceptable. And so by the time you're 20 or so, you got a pretty long bag behind you. And then by the time you're in your 40s, you're trying to pull that stuff out of the bag and see what you missed. By the time you're 65, you're really trying to pull it out because you haven't got long to see what you don't know about yourself. And that's what this book is saying, is that your job as you get older, actually all throughout your life past your 20s, is to recognize those parts of you which you have disowned. And according to Jungian psychology and Robert Bly and this author, they call that the shadow. Now the shadow itself, I think, is an odd title. It really means it's just in the dark. You don't know it's there. Quite often we so don't know it's there, we deny that it's there. And that denying of it then precludes us from having access to it. So take, for instance, if you grew up here in the South and you were a male and you're 15 years old and you're discovering that you want to be attracted by women or girls, I guess, at the time. And so you decide that the way to do that is to be an athlete. Well, you might push your artistic self into the bag because that looks like you're just not tough enough, and so that's lost. Now, as you get older, you would pull that out, and it had always been there. You'd always had the ability to discern which colors go well together, and shapes and textures, etc. But that was diminished by your need to fit in at that time. So that's the kind of thing that can be in there. You can also have some relative negative things, like you're really a bully. Part of you is a bully, and you push that in there. You became a really nice person. You went to Sunday school. You learned you weren't supposed to do that, right? But so you have this bully in there, which makes you incredibly dangerous to be around because you don't know it. Because the bully didn't die. It just comes out sideways. Rather than owning up to you're a bully, you bully people without even knowing you, or without intending to do it, without actually being good at it. Because if you have it as part of your repertoire, then you can be a good bully. And there are places for a bully, are they not? Sometimes you need to tell somebody, just stop it, right? And to impose your will over theirs, and to be authoritative about it, and there's no two ways about it. Bully can be for the good as well as for bad. But when you don't recognize, because the bully is the power of your personality over another. Sometimes that's exactly right. When you don't understand it, when you don't know it's there, it can be a real problem because you're going to use it anyway. So the practice of becoming awake to the totality of who you are, may involve things that you don't like about yourself yet. You haven't found a place for them yet. So just as your artistic side might be more culturally acceptable these days, your bully not acceptable at all, there is a place for all of you in there. And the village that you see out among others in the world is the village you have placed also in your sack. You're towing behind you. You're bringing that village, but they're not as accessible to you as they could be if you knew they were in there and if we had come to a state of acceptance. When I was in my 30s, as I said, I started this, almost every practice that's talked about here. And the practice, the way I was being trained to deal with these unconscious aspects of it, was this practice that also comes out of Jungian philosophy called voice dialogue. Voice dialogue was started by a man in Southern California, and I went down there several times as he would have summer camps where people would do voice dialogue. It's granted not the thing that most 35-year-olds do, but that's what I was thinking was the best thing I could do with my life at the time. And the therapy or the practice goes like this. You would set up a series of chairs, maybe 9 chairs, and the therapist or the person conducting the practice would sit inside that semicircle, and the person working would sit in the center chair to start with. And there would be a conversation between the therapist and the client. We'll call them that, though they weren't all therapists and they weren't all clients, but we'll call those two. And the client would eventually say, you know, I'd like to work on this. And the this would be some part of their personality, some part of their being that they could identify. So it might be the critic, or it might be the driver that forces them to work endlessly, or it might be the one who's afraid, or the child, or the mother, or the poet, or the lover, or the hater. I mean, everything was on the table. And what you'd do is you'd get up from that center chair, you'd find one of the other 8 chairs out there, sit in one of those, and then become that. And speak, that's the voice part, from that, and have a conversation with the therapist from that place. And it is amazing because they have a history. Each one of these sub-personalities has a history, has a story, has an idea of what they think should happen, knows things that some other parts don't know, are just like a full-grown person inside you. And one of the questions that was always asked of the subpersonality is, what would you like the client to know? What would you like to know? And where do you come out, and what can you do that is helpful, and where do you feel blocked? Remarkable story. It's a remarkable experience because it's very non-threatening to everybody. Nearly. I'll say. I won't say completely. It's nearly non-threatening because it's a curiosity thing about that sub-personality. You're not really required to fix it nor reject it. You just want to know it. Once you have done that practice for, let's say, 15 or 20 minutes, which is enough, then you come back to the chair that you started out, and you look at that chair, so you get the experience of being the one who's noticing that you have that. And then you stand behind the chair and you assume the role of what's called the aware ego, which is more or less the witness. And you look out over the field of both the normal ego, the subpersonality, and potentially many of the others as well. And you come to this place by taking that position that you can choose whomever you need in the moment. So you don't bring a child to a dogfight. But the child has a place. And you don't put the child out to do your work. Oh, I'm just a little... No, you put the adult to do that work. But there's a place where you play with the child and you're aware from that child's place, or you're aware from the bully's place, or you're aware from the lover's place, or from the... You have this repertoire now that you can choose from, and the bag is much smaller when you know the characters in it. And that was the work. And you would say, because it's in this book about aging, oh, that must be for old people. No, that's for everybody. Because the sooner you have your repertoire in place, the more places you can feel at home, and the more things you can get done in your life, not just acceptance. But think of it, if you had been habituated to bringing the child out when you would come into an argument with an adult, how pathetic you would be. Might work once in a while, but occasionally you would just be outgunned, right? But if you could bring the child to play with another child and the adult to talk to adults, let's say the person who's fixing your car, you don't want to bring the child out for that, do you? You want to say, I want my car done this way, and you can't fool me. I'm alert, right? Do you know what I'm saying? Y'all with me on this? This is who you really are, is a conglomeration of lots of beings in you. And we walk around saying, I, meaning singular me. But it's not really the way we're made. But for convenience sake, you have to do that, because you cannot say, the child in me, oh, bad way of talking. But you need to know that you're complex, multifaceted, able to fit inside this body a village of beings, ready and willing to help. Because whenever you ask one of these sub-personalities what they want to say, it's always, I want you, they are always helpful. The critic is always helpful. Why do you have a critic? It's because they helped you at some point do the change that you needed. They were good for you at points. They can get overgrown. Sometimes you have to put these guys on a diet. And sometimes they're way too skinny. And you got to feed them something. You got to actually call on them, call them out, bring them out. And that's the way that practice works. It's essentially shadow work, according to this book. It would be what's called shadow work. But it is personality work of stuff we don't usually own. And here's a hint, if you're doing that. You have everything you see in the world in there. So, you know, we have this time period now where all our isms are coming to the surface, you know, and we're, you know, there should be a new one called politicism. Do you know what I mean? Where we, oh, you're one of those, you're red, oh, you're red, oh, no, you're blue, right? I can't talk to that. But you have those aspects like that. Very similar inside you. If you can see it, you could be it. So this is where the generosity of heart comes out. So another part of me has shown up in the world. So I should look to see how I own it, not if I own it. How am I like that? When am I like that? Why have I become like that or hidden it from myself? Those are interesting questions. And the practice here is of curiosity and not of condemnation. This is fundamental to your success with this, in my opinion. If it is condemnation you're after, self-condemnation or of another, you will, you'll just fail. It won't work. You won't grow and become more. You'll only become more judgmental. And that's just one of your personalities. You'll be stuck there. You won't have incorporated more of who you are. So judging and condemning is not the practice. Curiosity, that's all you're after. Ah, so. Oh, so. Really? I'm like that? Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. So it's not so bad. Do you know what I mean? It's really not bad. Imagine no one can insult you. Yeah, that's me. You're the dumbest person I've ever seen. Yeah, that's me. Right? How simple. How simple. That's one of the practices that this book essentially is asking is, in some form or fashion, come to know your shadow side, your other personalities. And this book discusses a lot of what's called ageism, in which we have put getting older in the bag, or have condemned it somehow, that it's ugly, it's distasteful, it's nowhere you want to be, when in fact it's part of life, and therefore it really needs to be opened up and with curiosity looked at and felt into and explored. And the beauty of each of these stages, which is also something you might put in your bag but can take out, each of these stages has its own beauty in it. It has its limitations also. You know, when you're 20, you are not that great. But you think you are. You're peaking in some things, but you haven't peaked at everything. And when you're 80, you are peaking in some other things, but not in the same things when you were 20. But you are peaking. You are coming into your own in another way. So whatever age you are, you're peaking in that age right then. And the best way to live is to live as your present self is, not like you're 20. Don't be 80 when you're 20, and don't be 20 when you're 80. To live your life as it is. Because just as it is the most beautiful way you could be in that moment. And there may be internally and externally ageism or discrimination for your age, be you 20 or 80. But for you to live your life the best is to be where you are when you're there. Right? Be here now, whatever that is. Be the person you are. So that's part of that shadow work she's talking about. The other thing she talks about in this book, which is a book for every age, in my opinion, is coming to pure awareness, coming to the place where you are not all the things I've described so far. You know they're there, but you're not that at your biggest, deepest core. Everybody has that, but you're not that. Do you know there's a difference? You have a car, but you're not your car. You have a body, but you're not the body. You have personalities, but you're not the personality. You are that thing that is no thing, that is behind, above, inside, whatever preposition you use for it, it is that thing. You're that awareness. And the cultivation of that awareness gives you fluidity with these things. Your personalities. Now imagine if you thought you were a personality, how much limited you would be. But if you think you are the body, how limited you are. If you think you are your personality, think how limited you are. When you are not just that, you are something transcendent. And we call that spiritual work. Largely spiritual work is about changing your identity. I just read a beautiful line in this book. It struck me quite profoundly. That line was this: it's moving your identity and your loyalty, that was from ego to spirit. moving your identity and loyalty from ego to spirit. Now, many of us have been practicing this idea of moving our identity from ego to spirit, but the loyalty, I noticed that that's where I was not, this idea of loyalty. To whom are you being loyal? Whose direction, whose purpose, whose force are you living out? Is it your ego or your spirit? You may say, yeah, we say it every day, every Sunday here, yeah, I am the light of God, I am the love of God, but are we living it like we are loyal to it? Tricky, huge distinction. Who are you loyal to? And can you be aware of the spirit that you are enough to be loyal to it? That is the quest. Can you hear it, feel it, sense it, whatever it is that you, however you know it, can you know that enough that so that you can be loyal to it? And I dare say it's not like for most people, a switch you can turn on and go, okay, I got it, I turn it off at will. But it's a process of discovery. Again, it's curiosity. It is not condemnation. You know, if you go, well, I'm actually more loyal to my ego, you go, well, now you know that. Not like that's a bad thing. It got you here, didn't it? The ego gets such a bad rap. But thank God we have one. I mean, it's functional. That bag was functional too. Quite necessary at one point. Absolutely necessary. You could not act out everything you ever thought or felt and still be accepted in society. Trust me, I've tried that. Didn't work. You have to put stuff in the bag and bring it out only once you've kind of matured. Once your ego is strong enough to pick and choose. That's how you do it. So the ego's not the problem. And if your loyalty has been to the ego, fine. Maybe it will need to be like that for a few more years. But ultimately, if you're going to be peaking as you get older in spiritual awareness, you're going to have to change your identity to spirit and not to your ego. And the way we get to that, oh so painfully often, is somebody tells us the truth. Oy. You're getting old. Let me just tell you a few stories about getting old. Something to remember, be kind to your kids. They're going to choose your nursing home. Bickering with your spouse is like trying to read the terms of use in a news service. You know, when you get that online. In the end, you just give up and click, I agree. My husband cooks for me like I'm a goddess by placing burnt offerings before me. And retirement is what happens between doctor's appointments. Okay, so the truth. That's what breaks down the ego's grip on us, is it forces us to look deeper because we don't like what we hear. So it's okay when you hear the truth. It's an initiation into something else. Y'all know the story of the Buddha. The beautiful Buddha was a prince in Nepal. His father wanted him to be a powerful king. And so he developed a court in which the Buddha would see only beauty. There were only beautiful people there. And there was no one old, and there was no one sick, and absolutely no one was ever dead there. One day the Buddha against his father's intent, leaves the compound and goes into the village, and he sees a sick person. And he says to his handler, "What is that?" And the guy says, "That's a sick person." And the Buddha had never seen a sick person. He was not the Buddha yet. He was just the prince. And he went, "Oh my God, that looks awful." The next day he goes out. He sees an old person. He goes, "What is that?" He says, "Oh, that's an old person. Everybody gets there sooner or later." No. And the third day he goes out, he sees a dead person. And the fourth day he goes out, he sees a monk. Now the monk is in pursuit of changes his identity from an ego to spirit. And Buddha to be says, "I want to be that. And I want to solve the problem of life." Now, as you know, Buddha has been dead a long time, and we still have sickness, old age, and death. So the solution, obviously, is not to deny their existence, but to live as the spirit, or to see beyond just the suffering into the beauty that is there. To awaken to something that is not obvious, right? That is what the Buddha did. And that what this course is about is the invitation to awaken to that inside a life that has sickness, old age, and death. So that's the work. And it would be the work if you were 20 or if you were 80. It's the work, the spiritual awakening. That's the work, this book. And this book is really good because it speaks with a heart. Somehow you can tell some people who are comfortable inside their own heart or their own emotion, they write differently than people who just think about it, right? They may have some academic things in here, but basically it's an invitation for you to be gentle and loving and kind with yourself, and to recognize you are this and that. You're a doer and a beer. You're an ego and a spirit. You're a body and a transcendent of the body. And to come into an internal acceptance of that, so that you might live out all of your life, because all of it matters. All of it is, as Ram Dass would say, is grist for the mill. All of it is part of your transformation. All of it is helping you. Not all of it is pretty, but it's all there for you, not against you. And that is the love of God coming through in bizarre and painful ways. And haven't we always wondered, how can God let that happen? Maybe it's not a mistake. Maybe it's not a curse. Maybe it's not the worst thing that could ever happen to you. It is the path of this planet. And since we're here, let's do it well. Let us pray. As we feel into this place of being right here in these bodies, with these personalities, feel what it's like to be you. Be you 15 or 50. let's see if we can commit ourselves to being an explorer of our lives, curious about the mystery of what this is, accepting of all of that which we are on the physical and the emotional and the mental plane, and over time shifting our identity from that to that which transcends, to that which was you before you were you, and will be you after you are gone. Let that be our quest, our adventure, our joy, our being. To this we commit. And so it is. Amen.
I hope you got something out of today's service. We intend to bring you things that will help you in your life become more of who you want to be, give you the freedom of forgiveness and the hope of expectancy that your life will unfold in a way that brings you joy, happiness, and is a contribution to the world. If you would like to contribute to this ministry, please go to unitytriangle.org, hit the donate button, and it will lead you into an easy way of doing that. We thank you for your attention and look forward to seeing you again here.